Hey guys, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools and DIY channel. Today we're going to learn how to paint metal with an HVLP paint sprayer. Stick around, I'll see you right after this. Okay, we're gonna paint this metal door here. Started sanding it down already, so we're gonna sand it down completely and maybe put some primer on some areas like this with the marks on them. Need to fill that stuff in. Okay, so you want to use an electric sander to prep larger areas like this instead of hand sanding it. It's a lot easier, trust me. When you're sanding metal or you're prepping metal for paint, use a 320 grit sandpaper. It's what's recommended. You don't really need anything higher unless you're polishing metal, and we're not working on cars. We're just gonna paint this metal door. Sanding the metal helps to create a rough surface, which helps the paint bond to it better. The rough surface gives the paint something to grab onto, so to speak, versus painting an unsanded surface where the paint will be more prone to peel or flake. If you need to remove rust or oxidation from the metal, you can drop down to a 220 sandpaper grit count at the lowest. Before you fill up those deep scratches with Bondo putty, make sure you clean them out first with some acetone or metal cleaning solution. As a matter of fact, you should clean the whole surface while you're at it. Painting a dirty surface will only result in a poor final product. Okay. The purpose of Bondo putty is to smooth out or repair pinholes, scratches, minor dents, nicks, chips, or other surface imperfections in automotive paint and bodies. Here we're using it on a metal door. It's a two-part formula that you have to mix up for it to work, and it bonds very quickly to primer, metal, fiberglass, or even aluminum. Now there's also something called filler, but it's meant for larger gaps and holes, and it takes much longer to dry than glazing putty, which is meant to be applied in thin layers as you see here. Glazing putty is much easier to shape and form, and it's less expensive than filler. This particular type of putty takes about 15 to 20 minutes to dry or harden. You can tell it's drying when the color starts to fade. Then we can start smoothing, or should I say roughing it out with the sander. Make sure you sand around the edges of any permanent attachments on your surface, like welded attachments. You can remove doorknobs or screwed on objects, but it's not as easy to remove a weld. So we went ahead and put some putty around those welded attachments there, because after grinding them down, the surface was a little bit uneven. So we evened it out by spreading some glazing putty over those areas. So while that putty's drying, let's mask off the areas that we don't want any overspray to hit. So we're gonna use some black industrial enamel because we're painting our door black, and that's the can on the left. And we're gonna add some 0 VOC reducer to it to thin it out with the enamel paint. Zero VOC stands for non-volatile organic compounds, which in some states, like California, it's required because of the regulations. Now, reducer is not the same as thinner. Thinners are for lacquer paints, okay? That's why you have lacquer thinner. Reducers are for urethane paints and enamel paints. So we're painting with an enamel paint, and we're going to use a reducer with it. So you got to make sure that when you're painting, you make sure that the products match or have the matching thinner or reducer. So we got our acetone to make sure that our surfaces are clean, and we got our paint filter to make sure the paint is filtered properly. So we're going to use an off-brand HVLP sprayer. That stands for high volume, low pressure sprayer. And that just means that it takes up large volumes of air to move the paint, but the paint leaves the gun or nozzle at a low pressure, and it hits the target at a much more softer and controlled speed. Now the air is supplied by an air compressor, and that's the air compressor hose coupling that we're going to connect to the gun. We got our mixing containers with our paint mixer. So let's start mixing some paint. You can mix your paint until it has that creamy consistency. That way you know that any lumps or air pockets are gone. If the paint has been sitting a while, sometimes it accumulates buildup on the bottom of the can. So you may want to tap the bottom with your mixer while it's spinning a few times to break up any residue on the bottom. Don't forget to keep your drill at a low speed while you're mixing. So click your drill to number 1, the lowest speed on your drill. That way you won't risk splashing paint all over the area and yourself. After removing your mixer from your drill, immediately place it in a clean container. Pour some thinning or cleaning solution on it to get the paint off. Nothing is worse than a paint mixer that sat with wet paint allowed to dry on it. Ran out of thinner on that can, so we're pouring in another can to make sure that the paint mixer is fully submerged in the solution so that we can clean it thoroughly. And after you finish painting, you can also submerge your paint gun and your paint reservoir in the solution as well to make sure that they come out clean, so no paint is allowed to dry on them and make it such a hassle to get the paint off. We're going to give the door one last wipe down before we start painting. It's a good idea to take a similar size container as your actual paint reservoir to measure out how much paint you need, and use that same container to mix your paint in. So when you pour it in the paint reservoir, you got exactly what you need, no more, no less. All right, guys, here's a quick rundown on how the gun works. You got your reservoir. That's where you put your paint in. Close that up. Then you attach it to your gun right here. That's where the paint goes into the gun. Now right here is where you attach your hose from your compressor to allow air to come into the gun. Now right here, this knob regulates how much air comes into the gun. Turn it, it can actually shut the air supply off. Turn it again, and it will allow air into the gun. This knob right here is like a governor on a car. So even if you have the trigger pulled back full throttle, it will only allow a certain intensity of paint to flow through the gun, even if you have the trigger pulled back full throttle. This knob right here controls the size of your paint fan. In other words, it controls how narrow your paint fan is or how wide it is as it exits the nozzle. All of these knobs can be adjusted to your liking, to whatever parameters you need when you're painting, okay? You can use this knob, once again, the air supply knob. You can turn that down, you can turn it up to adjust the amount of air coming into the gun. Like I said right here, you can adjust the width of the fan by turning this knob, and this knob right here acts as a governor. So no matter what the air supply is or airflow is coming into the gun, you can control it here. If you notice, this has multiple knobs on one knob. This knob right here is for the adjustment, and this right here is to lock it in once you get it to where you want it. You can kind of see how the trigger mechanism works in relation to the nozzle. If I take this off and pull the trigger, notice how this recedes when I pull the trigger back to allow paint to come out. So it's a good idea when you're cleaning your gun to take this part off the nozzle cap, clean that out, clean out all the holes and orifices to make sure they're clean, and make sure all these holes are clean as well as the main center orifice. You can take a steel brush to get down in the holes right there as well as in the middle there if there's any dried paint in there to help to get it out while you're cleaning. So here we're adding the reducer so it can help the spray gun handle the paint. If the paint is too thick, the paint gun can't handle it. So that's why you need the reducer to thin it out a little bit.
See the pattern? Close.
Okay, so that took no more than 2 coats, and look at it. It looks pretty good. Nice glossy finish, like what we wanted. Took his time, nice even strokes, and he took it home. All right, guys, so that's the basics on how to paint metal with an HVLP paint sprayer. I hope you guys got some great tips from this. If you got some comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. Don't forget to go to calibrate.com, support the channel if you want more content like this so we can get it out to as many people as we can. Go to calibrate.com, sign up for the email list to get some great articles on DIY and home improvement. Pick up some of those great products as well, and I'll see you guys next time.